tell us about McKinsey. That was quite rapid rise. And just tell us about your experience there and your passion and love for business and falling in love with the strategic planning world of a great world-class consulting company. Give us a little vignette of that.
Well, I really enjoyed McKinsey. McKinsey is a very good place to work. They look after their employees very well. Twice a year evaluations, very merit-based. If you're doing well, they reward you, and it doesn't even matter if you come from Belfast. And so, you know, it wasn't really anything I did per se. It was just the natural consequence of performing well on an engagement, and then you would get put on the next one. And you sort of built an internal clientele of senior partners who would say, I want Hanna on my next study. And that's what really helped. Then you got a good partner who puts you under his wing, mentors you, makes sure you know what you're doing, makes sure he doesn't expose you too far out in front, and helps you along. And I had several of those guys who were just fantastic senior partners at the firm who really shepherded me along and helped me a lot. McKinsey had some very interesting concepts. The firm was started by a man called James O. McKinsey, who was a professor of accounting at Chicago University. And he was one of the first to come up with the idea that you can actually figure out the cost of a product. Amazing as it may seem, in the 1920s, they didn't allocate costs to individual products in a manufacturing operation. They would sort of bunch costs together for a plant or an entity. Marvin's number one thing was that we serve clients. So we had this sort of mantra: clients first, McKinsey second, self last. And that was a very important thing to understand if you wanted to work in McKinsey, that what you did was for the client primarily, and you served the client, and if it hurt McKinsey but helped the client came first. And that I think fitted well with my understanding of what was important, was to serve clients and help them to do better in their businesses. So we end up living in this guy's apartment in Cadogan Square, and Nancy gets herself a position in Oxford to study for 6 months, and so we're living in London. And she's an Episcopal minister, which is the same thing as an Anglican, so we have to go to the Anglican church. And the nearest one is called HTB, Holy Trinity Brompton. So we go the first Sunday, and we walk in, and there's this huge church with 1,250 people in it, packed. And they're all between the ages of 20 and 35. So we looked around, and I said to Nancy, if this is church, it's not what we're doing in New York. She at that time was at a church in Rye. And we were used at age 50 to being about the youngest people in the church. And here we were the oldest. And I said to Nancy, whatever they're doing here, we've got to bottle it and bring it back to New York. So we kept going there, and every week we would hear Alpha, Alpha, Alpha. Somebody came to Christ on Alpha. Someone was filled with the Holy Spirit on Alpha. Someone was healed on Alpha. And then one Sunday, they got this guy out, a guy called Taylor, and he was a businessman. And he told his personal story about how he had gotten divorced. He was drinking like mad. And he was in such bad state that his friends on his business team said to him, "You should go to Alpha." And he said, "Wow, what do I need with Alpha? I'm having a great time." And they kept at him. And eventually he agreed to go. And he went through Alpha. And at the end of Alpha, he gave his life to Christ. So he called his wife. And he said, "I want to get back together. I'm a Christian now." And she said, "Oh no." She said, "First it was golf, then it was scuba diving, and now it's a Christian. You're not coming back here." But he kept on. And eventually she said, "Okay, well, you can come and visit for a Saturday." So he came and he visited, and eventually they began to build a relationship together again. And the priest at Holy Trinity Brompton asked him, "Where is your family now?" And he pointed to the front row. And he said, "They're here in the front row." Well, I went, oh! I couldn't believe it, that Alpha had rebuilt this family, that this guy's life was just going down the tubes. And he had gone to Alpha, heard the story of Jesus, and had transformed his life. So I thought, this thing is really good. So Nancy and I decided we'd go to a training. We went and were trained. And then as soon as we got back to New York, we started Alpha in her church.
So let's talk about Alpha. So there was no Alpha USA at that point in time, and that was 1997, so we're 16 years into it.
Yeah.
It was zero. And can you just do a quick statistic on what is Alpha USA today in terms of the infrastructure of it? And then I'd really like to ask you, how did your consulting background equip you for the work that had to be accomplished in order to get from where it was to where it is?
Well, I think at the moment there are about 7,000 churches doing Alpha in the U.S. There are about 50,000 churches around the world.
And what does doing Alpha mean?
Well, it's Alpha is a 12-week course, and doing Alpha basically means that you're running it at least once and maybe 3 times a year. What Alpha is a little bit like this in a sense, that you invite people to come for dinner. They sit at a table or they sit around in a circle, have dinner, then they listen to a lecture, just like you are now, and then after the lecture is over, they discuss it in the group. And they do that for 10 weeks. And each lecture builds on the one before and is some aspect of the Christian life. So the first talk is, who is Jesus? The second talk is, why did Jesus die? The third talk is, how can I be sure I'm a Christian? Fourth talk is, why and how should I pray? Fifth talk is, why and how should I read the Bible? Then there's a weekend where people are taught about the Holy Spirit and get an opportunity to invite Christ into their lives and be filled with the Holy Spirit. So that takes about 12 weeks, all told. So that's really what Alpha is. I've forgotten what the second part of your
Well, I want to come back to that. It's very important. In fact, I'm going to jump to it right now. I'm interested, and I think we'd all be interested in the anecdotes about how your consulting background equipped you and enabled you to put those 7,000 churches to work in that short period of time. Let me just suffice it to say, lots of strategy, lots of great planning and thinking, lots of great people and organization that frankly, Ali was highly prepared for, highly equipped, and highly competent for, and God knew that when he asked him to quote unquote leave McKinsey. And that's, I think, the way it is in this kingdom building business that we're in. God takes talented people and puts them to work in another line of business, but with the same competency and the same skill set.
Yeah.
But I'd like to talk about Alpha, and here's the question, and I think that this is going to kind of bring us to a close. And I want to focus on this because I think it's the most important thing. A lot of the guys here might be saying, well, wait a minute, hold on, stop the train. We've got a good church. Church is good. Why does church need something extra? Why does church need Alpha when church has church? Why do churches that do Alpha make a difference? Why do lives change? Why does the guy whose family is in the front row with the weeping and the sobbing, why didn't that happen before Alpha was there?
Yeah.
Why did that church need Alpha in order to make that transformation? And what does the church think about, aren't we good enough that we can't figure this out on our own? Why do we need this extra fertilizer?
Well, some churches, let me say,
Is that a
first of
fair
all,
question, guys?
some churches, let me say, right off the bat, don't need Alpha. And I'm not telling you that Alpha is the only way to evangelize and bring in new people. I'm not even going to tell you it's the best way. All I can tell you is I've done it and it works. It brings in people from outside the church. Now, a lot of churches...
And is that the focus, to really attract new people into the church?
Well, I would say it's a dual focus. The first focus is to bring new people into the church. But the second thing that Alpha does is it reignites the existing people in the church. And sometimes people in a church who've been going for quite a while, and maybe doing lots of work and serving in committees and doing lots of stuff, their faith gets a little tired. There's nothing that reignites people in a church like seeing people come to Christ. There's nothing that excites a church like having new young people come and be part of the church. And that's what Alpha is very good at. It's very good at getting young people to come to church, to give their lives to Jesus, and to learn what life is all about, and to fill that hole, not with televisions and automobiles and video systems, but with God. And the reason Alpha works, and the reason why most churches need it, is because in today's society, many people are quite frightened by the idea of church. So if I say to someone who doesn't go to church, come to church with me, their immediate response is a half a step back. Why would I want to go to church with you? I don't need church. I don't need God. But if you invite them to Alpha, it's a lot easier. Come and have dinner, hear a lecture, and we'll talk about it. That's something that people, especially those who are in business, understand. We do that all the time in business. Have a dinner, have a group of guys listen to a presentation, and then we talk about it. So you don't have Alpha in the church. You can do it in a pub, you can do it in a golf course, you can do it in a coffee shop, you can do it in a room of the church, dress the room up nicely so it doesn't look churchy. And so you don't frighten the people who are nervous about the whole idea of going to church. And once you get them into Alpha, you put them in a small group. And then chemistry takes place. We had one couple staying with us a couple of weeks ago in New York who now live in Philadelphia. And they met on Alpha, got married, and now they got 2 kids. And the reason they ended up going out with each other was because they were the only 2 in the group that stayed the whole course. Now that's unusual. Usually 80% of people who start the course finish it. But in their particular small group, everybody else left. And so there were just the 2 of them there every night talking. So the natural thing was to go out and Then they got married. So what brings people back is the relationships that they build at that table. And then the broader set of relationships that they build on the weekend where they hear about the Holy Spirit. And personal bonds are what they don't get if they just show up for church on Sunday morning. And so they don't come back. They go to church, nothing happens. They say, I don't need this. But they come to Alpha, they stay for 10 weeks. They form relationships with other people. They give their life to Christ. They get filled with the Holy Spirit. And things happen.
You were very passionate about your business career. You were doing well.
Me?
I know you seem very laid back and Irish, but you're very passionate. And why do you do what you do? You're continuing to do it. You're now in Latin America all the time. You are fully baked into this, what you refer to as this kingdom building work. Why don't you just, you're pushing 70. You're building a wonderful resort course over in Northern Ireland. You got this fantastic bed and breakfast over there. You love it over there. You've already done your thing. You've served your time. You've put in the last 16 years. You built those 7,000 Alpha-related churches here. Why don't you just say it's time to hang it up and go enjoy life a bit? You've earned it.
Yeah, but wait a minute. The greatest privilege that a man of 70 can have is to be needed to do work. You say having fun, the best fun you can have is to be needed to do work. Play the occasional round of golf, but to be needed to do something, that's where you get satisfaction. So I don't think of it as, I wish I could leave Alpha and go and have some fun. I think of it as, I wish I could do more for Alpha and have more fun.